This video will show you how to make an old laptop usable again by installing Antix Linux. This video is intended for someone who has previously used Windows or Mac as a general user and has no experience in Linux. Take note that I'll be doing the entire install using menus, and you will not need to enter commands manually. There are many options when installing Antix, but I'll be showing you only one simple and straightforward way. This method will use either a DVD or USB stick to install, and I'll be showing you the simplest method of erasing what's on the hard drive completely and then installing Antix on the whole hard disk. This method gives you the added bonus of creating a great live DVD or USB that can be used in many ways. Before I even begin the process of explaining the installation, I must make a warning and a disclaimer. First, the warning. If you have anything stored that you want to keep on the computer you plan to revive, make sure to back up all your data on at least 2 separate locations, such as an external hard drive, a CD, a DVD, a USB stick, or a cloud service. The process that I show you will wipe all existing data from the hard drive. Showing you how to do such a backup is beyond the scope of this video, and there are plenty of resources for this topic out there, so you need to do your own research. Next, the disclaimer. I have successfully installed Antix on several old computers the way shown in this video. But I take absolutely no responsibility for data loss that might occur for whatever reason during the process. Why should you choose Antix for reviving old computers? First of all, Antix is part of the larger Linux family. And like all Linux distributions, it is distributed for free, and almost all Linux software is free too. I've tried many Linux distributions, and Antix is the one that has worked the best for old computers every time. By old, I mean things like 15 to 20-year-old computers with a Pentium 2 or 3 processors and 256 megabytes of RAM. Antix works great on newer computers too. Basically, any computer with a working DVD drive or USB port should be able to run Antix. Plus, Antix still supports 32-bit systems. Antix is free, like other Linux distros, which is a great reason to use it. The biggest pro of using Antix as opposed to other Linux distros is that it is truly able to make old computers work. Don't expect miracles though. Antix supports most varieties of hardware out of the box. The distro is actively maintained, and there is friendly community support on the forum. Antix is different from Windows and Mac in some ways, but similar enough that you should be able to do basic stuff right out of the box. That said, there is a bit of a learning curve. In the effort to make Antix as lightweight as possible, the developers have chosen some solutions that require a bit of new knowledge. And you do need a little patience to get some things to work. The entire Linux world is full of developers and programmers, so there's a fair bit of technical jargon you will need to learn. Linux is also very English-centric, so language support in your local language is not always so good. I should also mention that Antix Linux includes some bookmarks in the web browser of a political nature. And some people have expressed negative opinions on these bookmarks, but they do not affect the usability of the system itself at all. So if you're okay with that, you can just disregard it. I should point out that if you have an older computer lying around, the only other option might be to discard the computer. So I think your efforts will be rewarded. So, what are the requirements for installing Antix? For the purpose of installing Antix, you'll need a working computer. Almost any computer made within the past 20 years will work, and a few that are older will also work. It should run on a Pentium 3 processor, but I must admit I haven't tried that. I will try on a Pentium M processor. The system should work on as little as 256 megabytes of RAM. I haven't tried that either, but the system works comfortably on 1 gigabyte of RAM. You need a hard drive with a capacity of at least 5 gigabytes. You can run a fully functional version of Antix without a hard disk, but in this video we'll be focusing on a regular install. You will need a working DVD drive and a DVD installation disk, or a USB port and a USB installation stick. In the latter case, you need to make sure that the computer can boot from USB. It goes beyond the scope of this video to show you all the ways you can check this, because different computers have different ways of setting this up, so you need to do a little bit of your own research. But I'll show you how I do it on the machine that I'm using. Now, on choosing your version of Antix, because there are several versions. Antix is one of a declining number of distros that still support 32-bit processors. This alone makes it a good choice for old computers. I'll refer to the issue of 64 or 32 bits as architecture. Selecting the architecture is the most critical choice, which needs some consideration. When it comes to architecture, a 32-bit processor will only run on a 32-bit installation. A 64-bit processor will be able to run both 32 and 64-bit systems. 32-bit processors were common up until the early aughts. If your computer was made after 2003, it's more likely that it's a 64-bit system. There are several ways to check your processor architecture if you are in doubt. I will not cover this in detail. You will need to do some detective work for yourself. I'll show you how I found out this info on the machine I'm using. However, if your computer currently runs Windows or Mac OS, you can identify your processor from inside the OS. You can also search the internet for the model name of your computer to find out the processor type. You may also be able to identify the processor in the BIOS. If you have tried everything and still can't decide if your computer is 32 or 64 bits, you can simply try and see which version will work. If you want to be certain that your system should work, select the 32-bit version. Remember, a 32-bit version should always work, but it will probably not work optimally on a 64-bit processor. Antix comes in 4 different flavors. They are really not so much flavors as they are downscaled or upscaled versions of the same basic system. The net and core flavors are for expert users only, for reasons I won't be getting into here. For the purposes of this video, the only choice is between base and full. The difference really lays in the number of applications that come pre-installed. and in some cases in differences in default applications. For this reason, the full version is roughly 1.5 gigabytes download, while the base distro still fits on a 800 megabyte CD. If your only option is to install by way of a CD, choose the base distro. If you can install by way of a DVD or USB, I recommend the full version. A small but significant difference is that the base version runs the Dillo web browser, while the full version runs Firefox. For maximum compatibility with modern websites, I recommend the full version with Firefox. However, if you choose the base version, you can always download and install applications such as Firefox later. For this video, I'll be installing a full flavor. The look and feel of the base version should basically be the same. The current machine is an Acer Aspire 1640. By searching the web, I found out that the processor is 32 bits, that the machine has 1 gigabyte of RAM and a hard drive of 60 gigabytes. As a consequence, I'll be downloading the full version in 32 bits. For the purposes of this video, I'm recording this part on a Windows machine, but it should not make a difference what computer you are using. To acquire Antix, head over to antixlinux.com. Select the Download tab and next the ISO Download submenu. This page is full of technical information geared at the experienced Linux user. As a first-time user, you need just 2 things. First, download the right version to a hard drive, and second, create a bootable disk or USB to use for the installation. If your target computer is working, you can do this on your target computer. Before we can even download the file, we need to select our download location from the list on the website. If in doubt, choose the SourceForge location on the top of the list. You can alternatively choose a location closer to your own, which will most likely result in a faster download. Here I'll be using the SourceForge location. When choosing SourceForge, we are forwarded to the SourceForge website, and a whole list of files are available to download. Remember, we want the 32-bit full version. The 32-bit version is marked as 386, for reasons I won't get into here, while the 64-bit is marked as x64. So the file we're looking for should be named something like 386 full. An easy way to find this file is simply to sort the files according to size descending, and the file we want will be listed near or at the top. If you want the 64-bit version, it will be the largest, while the 32-bit version is the second largest. Now simply click on the file you want, and the download should start automatically. Download times will vary considerably, but 1.5 gigs should be manageable. Let's make a bootable installation medium. For the purposes of this video, I'm recording this part on a Windows computer. The file you have downloaded is an ISO file, which is also called an image file. This image file needs to be placed on a disk or USB, but not just in any old way. There are many ways of making a bootable disk from an image file, but I'll only be showing one such method. The process is basically the same whether you use a DVD disk or USB. Here I'm using a program called Rufus, which is downloaded from the website rufus.ie. I also recommend using Etcher by Balena. Start by inserting an empty USB drive or a blank DVD disk into your computer and start Rufus. In the main window, select the USB or DVD under Device. Then select the downloaded file of Antix in the boot selection field. Leave everything else to the defaults and click Start. When Rufus is done, eject the DVD or USB. You now got your bootable installation medium. Take the installation medium over to the computer you're reviving and insert it. We're now ready to set up the computer to boot from the USB or DVD. In this section, we'll set up the computer we're reviving to boot from DVD or USB. Every computer is slightly different, but when you switch on the computer, there's usually a message like "press this button to enter setup." You will then start the BIOS utility. Every BIOS can look slightly different, but as you see here, there is a system of tabs, and one of the tabs is called Boot. The point here is setting up the USB as the first boot device, which means that the computer will start from the memory stick. The USB stick is found under hard drives and is a Kingston. I move this drive to the top and then hit Save. If you want to boot from CD or DVD, just move the CD drive to the top. Once you finish, the computer should restart and boot into Antix. This is what it looks like when you boot into the live USB or DVD. The process is the same whichever medium you're using, but I recommend using a USB if you can. Depending on the machine you're using, your menu might look a little different, but as long as you use the default choice, you should be okay. There are a few options in the menu, but we're going to go with the default one, Antix 21. Next, the boot process begins. How much time this will take depends on your computer. Here, I've sometimes sped up the video. Now we have arrived into the desktop. You can use this as a live system, which is really good, but for now we're going to go straight to the installation. Click the Install button. The first thing we're going to do is set up the keyboard. If you're already using a US layout, just click Next. I'm based in Norway, so I'll be replacing the layout. Hit Change Keyboard Settings. Hit the plus sign and find the layout you want to use and click OK. You can keep the US layout and even add more layouts, but I just use the Norwegian one, so I'll remove the US layout. Mark the US layout and click the minus sign. Once you're happy with the settings, click Next, and you can of course change these settings after the installation is complete. Next, we're going to select the installation type. For beginners, I recommend doing the default, a regular install using the entire disk, and that's what I'll show you here. If you have more than one disk in your computer, make sure to check that you've chosen the right disk under Use Disk. Hard drives in Linux have a special naming convention, so the first disk in the system will be called SDA, and in some cases SDA1 and SDA2. The second disk will be SDB, and so on. I'll be keeping the slider all the way to the right, as is the default choice. Before you click Next, make absolutely sure that you've selected the right disk and that you're okay with erasing all the previous data on the disk. Make sure that you backed up all your data, as it will be impossible to recover the old data once you click Next. As you will see, the system tells me that the disk is starting to grow old. If you plan to do something critical with the computer, you might in this case consider replacing the hard drive. Next, the installation will begin creating the system, which means copying the files from your USB or DVD to the hard disk. How long this takes will vary depending on your system, but it will be quicker than installing Windows. You can click Next and continue to do a few more steps while the system is copying. We have to give the computer a name. You can use the default name or choose one of your own. Here I chose the name Revive. Next, we have to set up location and time zone. The locale setting is important, as it will determine the language of your installation, which is separate from the keyboard layout. I recommend using the default American English. I haven't checked all or even many of the other locales, but the Norwegian locale was not totally satisfactory to my taste. For the time zone, choose what suits you best. I prefer to display my local time in my local format. Next, we need to set up a default username. I recommend something short and simple that's easy to type. For the purposes of this video, I chose the username Reviver. Choose a password or choose not to use a password. I typically choose to use a password. If I'm the only one with access to the computer, I tend to choose something that's short and simple to type, because I will need to type it a few times, such as when I install in applications. Setting up a password can also be smart to prevent yourself from doing unintended damage to your own system. I also recommend selecting the auto login option if you are the only one with easy access to the computer. It speeds up the boot process by a few seconds, and that is important, especially with old computers. Next, the system will do some final configuration. How long this will take depends on your computer. The video is sped up. Now the installation is complete. We need to reboot the computer to use our new system, so leave the checkbox in the default position and click Finish. The system will now reboot. At some point you will be asked to remove the installation medium. Take out the USB or DVD and press Enter. Normally the system will boot from hard drive, but if you need to, enter the BIOS again and set up the hard disk as the first boot drive. We are now booting into the installed system for the first time. You will get the GNU grub screen, and you can enter the default option to start the system, or just wait a few seconds and it will automatically start. Your computer will display a lot of text messages. How long this is going to take depends on your computer, but it will be faster than almost any Windows boot up. Your system is now ready to be used locally. In most cases, the Wi-Fi window will probably open automatically when you boot up. But if it doesn't, go to the menu button at the bottom left, select Applications, Internet and Conman Setup. You will then get a list of all the available networks. Select the network you wish to connect to, enter the password and click OK. You should now be connected. Before we start using it properly, let's take a short overview and adjust some settings. The system looks pretty similar to a regular Windows desktop, and you could just turn off now and start exploring by yourself. To the top left is the home folder marked Files. In Linux, all user files are stored in the home folder. Below is a help system which you can explore for yourself. To the right you can see the system monitor called Conky. Of particular interest here is the memory usage. On idle, the system uses less than 200 megabytes of RAM, which is pretty impressive. To the bottom left is the menu, and next to it are some programs that are pinned to the taskbar. To the bottom right is the volume control and the system clock. Let's check out the menu. We already tested it briefly. Now let's have a closer look at how it works. The default Antics menu resembles a classic Windows start menu in many ways. I'll review a few central items to get you started. To start a program, go to Applications. The apps are categorized automatically. Let's say you want to write a document. To do so, go to the Office category and select LibreOffice Writer. And this will start the program. By the way, this program is an excellent example of how Linux provides free and functional alternatives, in this case to Microsoft Word. The menu can be a little overwhelming. Have a look around and familiarize yourself with the possibilities. In addition to the menu, there is a taskbar on the bottom, similar to other operating systems. Noteworthy are the programs pinned to the taskbar right next to the menu. In particular, there is a shortcut to a software installer, which we'll have a closer look at soon. There is also a shortcut to the default web browser. And to the right of the taskbar, there is a volume control, some indicators and the system clock, much like a typical Windows machine. It's a good idea at this point to review a few settings so that the system is to your liking. There are also a few operations that are smart to do to maximize the efficiency of your computer. Let's do this first. First, we will enter the Control Center and look at a few selected options. Hit the Antics button on the bottom left and select Control Center. To the left of the Control Center are some categories. We'll start with the Desktop category. Here we'll change the font size. Click Set Font Size DPI, and you may need to enter your password. Choose the font size that is right for you. Now let's go to the Software category. The first thing we'll do is enter the Repo Manager. This is not essential, but it can be very useful to speed up downloads. Repo is short for a repository, which is the location where software is stored on the internet. Under the Antics tab, choose Select the fastest Antics repo for me, and then do the same for the Debian tab. It might be a good idea to select the Antics Updater and do a system update. This will take a little time, so you can do that later or when the computer is idle. I'll show you how to do a system update at the end of the video. Now it's time to go to the Systems tab. If you wish to make changes to the keyboard and time zone setup, this is where it happens. Under Date and Time, I recommend selecting Use Internet Time. Now, let's go to the Session tab. Here we can set screen resolution. This section is somewhat technical and not so intuitive. I'm assuming you have a single screen. Go to Output and choose the top output and navigate to Resolution. Choose the resolution you prefer and then click the marker in the main window. Now, this is perhaps a good example of how Antix and some other Linux distributions sometimes favor solutions that cater to engineers rather than the general public. The Login Manager is where you can change your settings for auto login if you want to. Now, let's go to the Hardware tab. I suggest you have a look at the PC information where you can learn about your hardware and system. You can't do anything wrong here, so take your time to look around. There are also settings for printers and your mouse, and on the right hand side you can adjust your sound settings. In particular, if you have more than one sound card, you can choose which one to use here. Most of your hardware should be supported by default, but if you have a NVIDIA graphics card, you might need to visit the Drivers tab. It goes beyond the scope of this video to show you the details of that process. Under the Maintenance tab, there are options for backing up your system, which I recommend investigating, but again, it goes beyond the scope of this video to delve further. The User Manager is where you can add and change users. Now, let's talk a little bit about the desktop and file management in Antix. The menu is fairly similar to a Windows menu, but the desktop and file management is somewhat different. In Windows and Mac OS, this is an integrated part of the system. In Antix, this is a modular system that can be highly customized. By definition, the file manager is a computer program that provides a user interface to manage files and folders. And a window manager is system software that controls the placement and appearance of windows on screen. Antix has a minimalistic approach in order to keep things lightweight. The default file manager in Antix is called Rocks. It behaves differently than you might be used to. For starters, you're not allowed to store files on the desktop. And second, there are no double clicks in Rocks. This behavior can really take some getting used to. There are several other differences. For example, there are no panes in Rocks. However, there are alternatives which I will get to soon. The default window manager in Antix is called IceWM, standing for Window Manager. This operates fairly close to standard Windows or even Mac behavior, and it works well for me. There are a few alternatives. The easiest way to change the file manager and window manager is by way of the desktop menu. Click the Antix menu button, select Desktop, and then Other Desktops. The menu gives you access to no less than 13 combinations of file and window managers. Some are best operated by a mouse, and if you're on a laptop, make sure you know your mouse gestures. Personally, I like the CCC File Manager, while I'm happy with IceWM. Thus, I select the combination CCC IceWM. CCC is a file manager that works a lot more like Windows Explorer than Rox does. You have the ability to view things in panes. Here it is called Tree View. You can also easily access your drives. The software installer is an easy way to install selected programs that Antix developers find suitable for the system. The software is ordered in categories, but you can also just use the search function. Let's say we need an audio editor. We review the audio category and find Audacity. We check the box and click Install. You may need to answer a few questions in the process, and in that case, just answer yes. The program is automatically added to the menu, in this case under Multimedia. You will note that during the software installation, a separate window will open up that displays a lot of text. This is the terminal. The Linux terminal is a text-based interface used to control a Linux computer. Experts will use the terminal all the time. I highly recommend learning to use the terminal, but it is beyond the scope of this video. The software installer should satisfy basic user needs. There is also a large selection of software already included. However, there are several other ways of installing software, and much more available than the software installer offers. For beginner users, I recommend exploring the Synaptic Package Manager. This is found somewhat hidden away under Applications and then Preferences. Software in Linux is a large topic. Here I will limit myself to practical application issues. Say that you're interested in statistics. There's a great free program called R. After a little googling, I found out that the package I need is called RBase Core. I search for that in the search field and look through the results. After locating the right package, I check off the box, click Mark for installation, and then hit Apply. In the dialog box, I'm asked to review the changes that are being made to my system. And when you download from an official repository like this one, all the software is safe to use. A great thing about Synaptic is that it checks that you have everything you need on your system to make the program work. This is referred to as resolving dependencies. Simply hit Apply and wait for the installation. If you're keen to look under the hood, click for details and watch the system perform all the commands needed for the install. On occasion, you might also need to answer a question during installation, so I recommend watching the details. So now it's finally time to check out the performance of this computer. A big part of this will revolve around the web browser. Apart from gaming, web browsing is in fact the most challenging thing for an old computer to handle. And browsing the internet has become such an integral part of modern life. Next, I'll be covering streaming by looking at YouTube and subscription services like Netflix and Spotify. I'll also have a look at some multimedia players, and finally I'll take a look at some Office programs. Let's do a simple Google search for Antix Linux. The search page loads reasonably fast and there are lots of relevant links for you to check out. Let's try out a news site. NRK is the Norwegian public broadcaster and they have a full-featured site. The site loads reasonably well, but it takes some time to load all the pictures completely. Wikipedia loads quite well too. It may be because it isn't as graphics heavy. The next few tests are all about video performance, in particular streaming video such as YouTube. To test streaming video, it's good to have a reference. So I will play a video from the hard drive and compare that with the streaming on YouTube. The video is Big Buck Bunny, an animation film from 2008 that has the advantage of being open source, like Linux and Antix is. The video is in high definition, and first I'll play a bit of it in a player window. The video plays quite smoothly, although it obviously doesn't look as good as it would on a brand new system. Next, I try to play the video in full screen. Still, it plays quite smoothly, although you see that the bird flapping its wings looks a little jagged. Now, we will try to play the video on the YouTube website. The first thing you'll notice is that the page is slow to load. There are lots of elements on this page and it is taking a toll on the computer. The video is very slow to load and even misses several seconds of the beginning before it is able to catch up with the action. This is definitely not very satisfying. Fortunately, there are alternatives. The one I like the best is called SM Player, and it is found under Multimedia. The app itself is somewhat slow to load, and it takes some time for the clip to load too. But once it starts, it plays as smooth as the file from the hard drive. Even in a full-screen window. Fairly impressive performance for a 17-year-old computer. The YouTube video player is even more bare bones. When you start it, you only get a terminal window where you search. Search results are displayed and selected from a list. But at least the video started playing. Immediately it's clear that there is a problem with the playback. The video appears to have higher resolution than the screen. Setting the program to full screen fixes this problem, but it's apparent that the processor is struggling to keep up with the streaming video data. Now, most commercial streaming sites like Netflix should work okay, but on this machine we're out of luck. Most commercial sites do not support 32-bit systems anymore. I'd also like to mention that Antix contains several multimedia players, such as Celluloid, MPV player and the minimalistic XMMS. The installation by default does not support some codecs, but if you install the VLC player, you should be able to play just about anything. Now, let's quickly check out the LibreOffice alternative to Excel. We download a spreadsheet from the World Health Organization and open it up in LibreOffice Calc. The computer is rather slow to respond, but it's able to read and render the spreadsheet apparently perfectly. Finally, I'll show you how to do a system update. Let's go to the Control Center and the Software tab. Hit the Update button. A terminal window eventually opens up and we need to answer a question. Most of the time you can safely approve of these inquiries. Do take note that updating this system fully for the first time took over an hour. Before I give a conclusion, I should also note that the system, as it is now, has a boot time of a little over 1 minute. So, what is the conclusion? We were able to successfully install Antix 21 on a computer that is 17 years old. The installation was quite quick, although it wasn't shown in real time here. Responding to the output from the installer probably took most of the time. We were able to easily get the Wi-Fi working and to adjust system settings. Doing a Google search and doing some light web browsing worked quite well. Streaming video was the biggest challenge. The YouTube website was in itself a large obstacle, but by using SMTube we were able to view content quite comfortably. YouTube video players was not very successful, but you might have more luck. Since this was a 32-bit machine, we couldn't get Netflix and the like working. LibreOffice could take what we threw at it, although the test was limited and the computer was rather slow. All in all, I find it quite amazing that Antix was able to make the computer work at all. In fact, the performance exceeded my expectations. It's also amazing that you can still find new and updated software that works on this machine. As you understand, there are limitations in the processing power of this computer, so you can't expect miracles. Nevertheless, Antix was able to successfully revive it and make it into a working machine. Its lifespan has been extended by a few more years. If Antix keeps up the great work, it's likely that the hardware will die before the operating system becomes obsolete.